Welcome to Unscripted with Russo. I'm your host, Ashley Russo, president and executive producer of The Peak TV. For our podcast, we decided to explore the people behind the narratives. I'll introduce decision makers and influencers who are winners in their field and find out the intimate story behind their rise to success. Okay, everybody, welcome to Unscripted with Russo. We have an amazing show. We are very fortunate to have world-famous, world travelers here with us, Craig Thatcher and Nyke Van Wyk, amazing musicians. Thanks, guys, for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
And making time in your busy travel schedule. I understand you've been all over the place.
It's been a crazy year. It's been a crazy life, but the last 10 years have gotten extremely busy. But yeah, this fall has been amazing. I don't know where the time. You know when they tell you when you're a kid that as you get older that time really flies by. Well,
it really does.
It just is going crazy. I don't know how did we end up at Christmas already.
Yeah.
We've done a bunch of Christmas shows already. I can't believe it.
It always happens quickly, and I always find like it sounds like a really good idea a year in advance or 6 months in advance. And then you get to it and you're thinking, why did I think that schedule was going to work?
Yeah. Every year I keep saying I'm going to go a little lighter. And then it just piles on. And you know what? On one hand, I'm very grateful. Because at my age, I'm just glad to be busy and glad to be working. But and him, he sucks it all up. He can go 24/7. But I'm slowing down.
So Nyke, you're dragging Craig around a little bit.
Believe me, he does his fair share of dragging. It's fine.
We just got back a little while ago from Scotland and Ireland.
Oh, beautiful.
We were there for almost 2 weeks with 65 of our closest friends.
65.
Let's say that's a nice way to say it. Yeah, we traveled,
Definitely
we do these tours where we take people from the valley and we have like bus loads. In this case, 2 bus loads.
Wow.
And we travel around, and we had done Ireland this way before. We did Italy like this 2 years ago, I guess it was, 3 years ago. And so I had been to Scotland before with my wife, and I suggested that, hey, maybe let's add Scotland to this. Everybody wanted to go back to Ireland because Ireland is just one of the
so gorgeous.
It's one of the greatest places on earth. People.
It's funny. It was sort of one of those things. Of course, I wanted to go, but was it at the top of my list? Not really.
Yeah.
And then I went, and not only, of course, the countryside's gorgeous, but I was very struck by the warmth of the people.
Absolutely.
Everyone's your best friend.
Absolutely.
And genuinely, it's pouring out of them.
Yeah.
And the food was delicious, which is not really what the Irish are known for.
The food and
the
pubs and the distilleries
and the music.
The whiskey.
There's music everywhere you go. I mean, there's really like a soundtrack to Ireland.
Fantastic.
That's my heritage, and I love when we go over there. And just even when coming over from Scotland to Ireland, and we were in Belfast this time.
We went from Scotland to Belfast on a big
pretty neat to be able to not only make a career making music, but to have it take you around the world. So I want to ask you both about your childhood a little bit. Where'd you grow up?
I didn't have one.
Where'd you grow up, and how'd you get into music? Craig, we'll start with you.
Well, first off, my family is from Hellertown.
Oh, so you're really right back in your hometown
my family
here.
is from Hellertown.
Welcome back.
On Pope Valley Road, on my father's side. And as a matter of fact, his name is on the monument down here in the cemetery for World War II.
The pass you drove me by that one time?
Yeah, we did go by there. And he went to high school down here where it's now, I think, a retirement home.
Okay. That used to be a school.
High school.
Oh, okay.
That's where he went to high school.
That was Saucon Valley High School?
That's where,
I didn't know that.
Whatever they called it, that's
back then.
where he went, yeah. Huh. And so he was a guitar player, but he was actually a railroad worker with the steel company, PB&E Railroad. But he had a guitar, and I have a picture hanging in my living room, taken up on Poke Valley Road, 1933. He would have been 8 years old.
Wow. And
he's holding the guitar. He's standing there with his mom and dad and his aunt. And that is the guitar that I started with, in 1964 after seeing the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. Like millions and millions of other players.
I was going to say, that was a pivotal moment.
That was.
Inspired people to pick up guitars.
I mean, you read, great huge artists that, very well-known artists who will cite that as the moment that they realized, hey, that's what I want to do. I mean, you see all those screaming girls in the audience, it's like, what a job that is. So that's when it started.
Okay, and how old were you then?
I was 8. I was the same age.
I would say
was
picking
the
up a
same
guitar at 8 is tough because
particularly for me, I was
don't
little.
play the guitar, but I have tried. As my husband sort of, knows.
It's very difficult. You got to be
It's
really,
difficult.
really special.
It's really, but it's hard. The strings are tough, and
Yeah.
your hands are little, and I think that's cool. What about you, Nyke?
Fast forward 30 years.
I was 5, and I actually woke my parents up in the middle of the night after having a dream that somebody gave me a violin as a gift. And when I opened up the case, I put the violin up on my shoulder. It wouldn't make a single sound, so it was like somebody hit mute on a TV remote.
Wow.
Yeah. So I woke my parents up and wouldn't let them go back to sleep until they promised me I could play. And then apparently my mom's favorite side of the story is at 6 o'clock, I don't remember this, I came in with a clip-on bow tie. And I was like, come on, let's go get the violin.
You probably did. That sounds like accurate.
Yeah, so...
That's amazing. So you actually had a dream about becoming a musician.
Yeah, and then once I got the violin, I remember the next morning, we picked up the violin. There was actually they're still there, but Alto Music, they have a number of locations back in New York. And the next morning, took the violin out of the case. Our buddy Harvey, who my dad worked with, was kind enough to give me the first rental violin we had for free. He took me to a back room, which is something that I took home after, with all the violins, is to try 4 or 5 different violins, make sure you get the tone, the sound that you really want. Yeah, I was even big as a 5-year-old. I started on a half-size violin, where most 5-year-olds are starting on a quarter size and a 1/6 inch or 6. But tried out a bunch of different violins, found one I liked. It was this whole German violin that they rented us, and like I said, he gave it to us for free for the first violin. And I remember waking up the next morning, and my parents were asleep upstairs. I took the violin out of the case, and I pretended there was a giant audience in the couches in front of me, and had no idea what I was doing. And that's
a lot
it.
of screeching.
No.
You were could play
sounded
right away.
Like, he just picked it up and went.
I love it. Now, did that lead to lessons, and then was it?
It took I think I remember my mom saying it was about a month or 2, but my parents had to find somebody who would actually teach a 5-year-old how to play violin. And we found this guy named Joe Bishkoff, who I was with for a year. And we were living in Cornwall, New York, which is just outside of West Point. I was with him for a year, and then I had Emily Faxon as a teacher for the rest of the time we lived in New York. And then I worked with Traveling Youth Orchestra from the time I was in fourth grade on to graduating high school, even after we moved here. My father would drive me back once a week, every Thursday night for rehearsals. But the orchestra, we toured the East Coast pretty extensively. We played in the White House 5 times. I played for 2 different presidents, which was fun. And then we recorded in Epcot Center. We worked with a ballet group out of Disney. My first time ever going to Italy was actually with the orchestra. We toured Italy and doing performances.
So you knew at 5 years old
Pretty
that you
much.
wanted to be a musician, and you haven't looked back.
Never.
So tell me a little bit about your family dynamic. You have your parents, siblings. What was your childhood like?
What was my childhood like? I never fit in anywhere. No.
Are you going to give
honestly,
me the artist story?
It's the truth. It's the honest truth. I couldn't play sports. My father was tough, World War II guy, built, muscular like him, football player in high school and all that stuff. My brothers were both more coordinated than I was. I have an older brother, 6 years older, and then a younger, 3 years younger. And I was pretty much a loner initially. And the guitar, I mean, the kids in the neighborhood, and I still see these, I call them kids.
Yeah.
I still see these guys today. We had a reunion of the one neighborhood about 3 years ago, and about eight of us showed up. It was really nice. But they all tried to teach me sports like baseball and football and basketballs. They tried and tried and tried.
Just didn't stick.
And it just wasn't my thing.
So sports wasn't your thing, but
Yeah.
the neighborhood kids were good to you.
The neighborhood kids, my friends, they really did try. But once I started playing guitar, It opened up a whole new world. And by 1966, by the time I was 10, we already had a band together. So back then...
Where do you find a band at 10?
Well, there's a picture of it on the web.
Okay.
We're playing, and the whole room is filled with these little girls' heads. There's no boys in the pictures, only us and these little girls. That picture's on the web. And what happened was, because of the Beatles, because of that British invasion happening from 64 to 66, that period was so fertile. Every week, new music coming out. And most of it that we listened to was coming from England. They really hit with the Beatles, and they just capitalized on that, and group after group after group came. And everybody in my class, all the guys, started playing guitars. I mean, you got to understand, kids would come to school from one day to the next wearing Beatle boots, having Beatle wigs, having collarless jackets. I mean, that's how it was. It was such an impact. It was amazing. So the next step is to form a band. Whether or not you could play did not factor into it. It was whether or not you could have access to an instrument. So I had my guitar. I was taking guitar lessons. One of my other buddies had a guitar, and my best friend was a drummer. The fourth member of the band was just our buddy. And we're trying to figure out, what can he do? So he played tambourine and shakers.
I was just going to say tambourine or a triangle.
And if you ever saw Mick Jagger back in those early days, always had maracas.
Always maracas.
Okay. Or as they call it, maracas. In his hands. He was always up at the mic, was shaking it. And they're actually on a lot of early Stone songs. But anyway, that is how we started. By 1968, we're all in 6th grade. We played our first paying gig.
Wow.
And
how do you get the paying gig?
Well, we were hired by a group of teachers for an association to play at their meeting. I still have the little, little brochure or flyer or program book from that event.
What were you called?
We were called Rock Bottom. Was the name of the band.
Love it.
We got paid $20. We each got $5.
That's pretty good, though. I mean, with inflation, that's a lot of money.
We each got $5. So my father and my brother picked me up. I took them out for ice cream. I had like a sundae or a banana split or something, and there was change left from the $5.
That's right.
That's what the times were like. You know, banana split
Probably
might have
could
been...
have gone to the movies.
Probably,
yeah.
75 cents maybe for a banana split. So I never looked back all through that. But I really did, going back there. I was lonesome. I think I was depressed. I really, really feel I was suffering from that. And I mean, I remember Sundays feeling so depressed and melancholy and going out by myself and just like, I don't know what I'm going to do, blah, blah, blah. Never had a problem making friends, but
you didn't have sort of that sense of purpose or a passion.
I had nothing yet.
Yeah.
Once I started playing guitar, that ignited the passion. And that passion is still there all these years later.
It's so special to have that. Do you feel like that first paying gig was instrumental in you realizing this could be something you could make a living at?
It was like, see, I told you we could do this.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, other kids doing paper routes, and I'm playing... I had the paper routes, and I worked at restaurants and all that other stuff to buy my instruments. But at that point, I'm like, look at this. You know, it was really great. First time I made $100 was like, oh my gosh. You know, people worked 40-hour weeks and made $300 or $350, and I made $100 in like an hour. And I was like, whoa. First night I was in the studio in Philadelphia, I made $200 for an 8-hour shift or session. I came home, I told my dad, Dad, look, this is $200. I was having a great time, sat around most of the time learning, played a little bit, and they gave me $200. And
now, what is his response to that?
Well, he's like, well, you're on the right path.
That's good.
Yeah, he was afraid of a lot of things, but of course, of me getting into a lot of things, of course, which I got into. But he did support it, and he was an Elvis guy, and he was always thrilled to be there wherever I was playing, you know. And the funny thing is, my father would he used to say to me, "Go to Martin Guitar. Go to Martin Guitar, get a job there." I'm like, "Dad, I'm an electric guitar player. You know, this is years later. I'm an electric guitar player. That's all I want to do. Martin's acoustic, and I respect that, and so on and so forth, but it's not for me." Fast forward to today, it's a major part of my life. Not only the acoustic guitar, but Martin guitar. I'm seriously involved with Martin. And
he knew. Parents know, right?
It's just funny how things turn out.
What about you, Nyke? You know, you had a different trajectory. You had the dream that led you to know you wanted to play, and that was sort of always a part of you. What was the response from your family? Do you have siblings?
I have one younger sister. She's 2 years younger, and she's actually expecting her first in January.
Yay,
so.
exciting.
So I'll be a real uncle, not just everybody's crazy uncle. So.
I love it.
But yeah, my sister was always involved in sports, and she was the academic of the family. She was always getting the great grades, and especially when we lived in New York, she was Miss Popular, ran around with everybody. And I never really had like a group of, I had a couple close friends who I was always with and just kind of floated with everybody else. I was never really like in a pocket of, you know, whether you consider the sports guys or anything else. But I had a lot of support from friends and family. And my elementary, middle school, high school, when I lived in New York, had no string program. It was either band or choir. There was no string program. So I think I was one of 3 people in the entire school district who played a stringed instrument. So I didn't get a lot of backlash of, you know, I hear a lot of kids today are like, "Oh, it's unpopular. You know, everybody, you know, has their opinion when you're walking in."
They didn't really have opinions because it wasn't.
Yeah, and in fact, so I'd bring the violin into school, and everybody thought it was the coolest thing. Yeah,
great. So you had a good experience. And you were saying that you were in a lot of orchestras, you traveled a lot. When did it become a profession?
I don't know, probably in high school when I started actually playing out to perform. You know, I worked, as you said, like I worked in a couple restaurants, and I worked landscaping and all the fun little side jobs, and started playing with my buddy Scott McKenna. I think we were 15 when he started playing a little before me. He introduced me to Dave Matthews and wanted me to play Dave Matthews all the time. So we bounced around Lehigh Valley here a lot, playing a lot of shows, and I think the same thing. We started playing, you know, our $100 shows here or there for the 2 of us, and then right out of high school, I mean, we were playing every night around the valley here. I went to 1 semester at Moravian College, and he had no interest in college. I really didn't have much interest in college. So instead of paying to go to college, we had the colleges pay us, and we did whole tours. And we did the whole country. We toured a bunch of colleges.
That's a whole side industry or industry within the music industry that I wasn't particularly aware of until later in life, that there's this whole college circuit.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
That is pretty impressive, right? The
Huge.
fraternities, the sororities, they pay you to come to things.
We didn't even do the sorority. We had the colleges themselves pay us. So
that's great. I was going to say, because I hear this from comedians. Like comedians do a tour, you know,
Yep.
tours of colleges. So
Well, those gigs back in the day were just, you know, it was just like beer all over the floor, like inches of beer.
sticky like this.
That was, there was a lot of those here in the valley.
Yeah.
But the college circuit for the touring acts, I mean, that was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Right here at Lehigh University, I mean, the Allman Brothers played at Lehigh with you know, Dwayne Allman. They had tons and tons of bands that used to come through, Moravian, Muhlenberg, Lehigh. They used to have concerts. Those were all the college and university concerts that was different from like the frat houses and things. They'd hire you to come in for how much beer can you drink?
Well, we never
that's
did
what
that
we'll
either.
hire you for.
We never did that either. In fact, like we.
He was always a good boy.
I know. I can
No, I wasn't.
Boy Scout over here.
He's a whiz.
No, actually, I never on that side of things, I never had my first drink until I was 26 because of playing in bars when I was 14, 15. And I'd see all these guys in front of me, not only just their actions, watching them fall over and get drunk, but I would come home and
I like that. I was 15 when I played my first. I said, I want to be just like that.
Well, I would come home with the violin would be saturated with the smell of smoke. This is before Pennsylvania went smokeless bars and all that. So I'd be playing gigs and performances, and then I'd go home and play classical performances or play with the Celtic stuff that I was doing, and pull the violin out. And the violin case would smell like smoke. I had a guy who, it wasn't here in Bethlehem, but we were performing, and some guy just spilled an entire pint of beer on like a $500 electronic pedal that I had.
Oh my God.
And literally just looked at me and was like, "Sorry, dude."
Yeah.
And then walked away, and then I'm like out of pedal. So I never had the desire to get like that. And Napa Valley was my first drink, though.
Now he does. Now he gets like
Now
We're
it's
okay.
wild.
He's
You're traveling. Now you've corrupted him.
He's always.
You've corrupted him. You're taking him to Ireland,
He's
Scotland.
always get me in the eye with his violin bow.
Once. Actually, that was just recently.
In Scotland.
We were in Scotland,
Scotland
we were outside.
It was right in front of this beautiful castle. This has never happened in 10 years.
In the 10 years, yeah.
Never, and we're so close, and people go like, how does he never? Well, on this occasion,
Well, we were.
Really?
he knocked my eye out. I picked it off the floor and put it
We got it
back
on
in.
video, and that was one of the reasons.
Yeah. Fortunately,
We were-
I can still see.
That's amazing.
We were. It was cold, and we were videoing, and we were playing completely acoustic, no microphones, nothing.
Yeah.
So we were standing as close as we could to not only hear each other, but also to
Stay
be
warm.
Well, to stay
It was
warm,
cold.
but to be able to be in frame of the camera with the castle behind us.
Oh, it's a
Oh, I can't wait to
Beautiful
see that.
picture.
That's
Yeah, we're working on
gorgeous.
it's
that now,
like
so.
it was worth the whole trip
All
to
right,
get
we'll
that.
make-
Actually,
try
my-
to put a little clip in this
Yeah,
podcast.
I'll send you.
Yeah, we'll make
That'll
sure
be
we get-
great. That'd be great. Now,
And my finger was bleeding. I
Yeah.
sliced my finger open.
Yeah.
I'm bleeding all over the violin, and I was
Yeah.
paying more
My
attention.
eyes laying on the
floor.
Well, every time I hit that one finger on the string, I was in pain. I was trying to pay attention to that, and I didn't realize where he was. And all of a sudden, I got and right in the side of his face. I hit him with the metal
Well,
tip of the
listen,
bow.
in
So.
10 years, one casualty,
right.
one eye.
It's very
Craig.
being a musician is very dangerous.
Very dangerous work.
Hazardous duty.
So you had kind of different experiences coming to music.
Mm-hmm.
How do you find each other?
Well, there's two things actually. Our trio, Don and Wade and myself, we were playing at a outside event somewhere,
Black Widow Tavern or something like that.
and Nyke and
The gentleman who I mentioned, Scott McKenna.
Scott were
Yeah.
playing at this place too. And Don, our drummer, Don Plowman, and I both heard him play, and simultaneously came up with this, hey, this guy's good. It'd be cool to have him join. And Don came up to me and said something, and I said to him, you know what? I'm thinking the same thing. So we talked to him, and about 2 weeks later, we were at Music Fest together.
Mhm.
But prior to that, and I don't know if I ever mentioned this to you, prior to that, I was playing at, what's the place your mom used to work at in Bethlehem?
Oh, Cleo's there.
Cleo's. I was playing at Cleo's on a Friday night,
That's right.
doing a solo there, solo acoustic guitar. And this lady who I didn't know just came up to me and said, my son plays violin. I said, oh, I'm thinking,
Right, of
"Oh,
course.
all right,
Yeah, yeah.
very good.
Probably not
Nice,
the first
nice."
mother that's
No,
approached you
all the
about,
time.
yeah.
Oh, that's nice, you know. He's really good. His name is Nicholas and blah, blah, blah. And I didn't realize that this is the guy, you know, when I met him, this is the person. I didn't realize it until I met his mother. Then later on, oh, this is who you were talking about.
You weren't kidding.
No, it's probably 6 months or so prior to us hearing he and Scott McKenna play. So that's how it came about, and that was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Now, what members consist of the band? What is the band when you say the band?
Well, when we have the full band, it's going to be it's the Craig Thatcher Band, and the band is basically Wade Leonard on bass and vocals, Don Plowman on drums, myself, Nyke, and then we'll have a keyboard player, either Craig Kostelnik or Cliff Starkey, either one who's available. We work with them both, and that's the full band. Then we'll have guests as well. So we have various shows, but we also go out as a trio, too. You know, doing Hendrix and Cream and stuff like that. Which, you know, honestly, there's no violin or keyboards. So
Sometimes they sneak me in.
yeah, we've made it work. But that's the basic
Wow,
band.
nice,
is,
lucky you.
No. You do that, and then all of a sudden nobody wants to hear you play. They just go, "Where's the violin? Hey, it's Hendrix. Come on."
It is.
You know?
It is interesting, not being from the Lehigh Valley, but then moving here 15 years ago and becoming, familiar, Craig, with your work through Music Fest, St. Luke's, various things around the community. You get to see, wow, this is pretty cool music. Then you find out, wow, this guy's like pretty famous and travels around the world. Then I become friends with a cousin of yours, Trish.
Yeah.
Good friend of ours, and the world gets a little smaller.
Yeah.
And then
we met in London that
we
one
met
time.
in London. We accidentally
Really?
met in London at the
Heathrow Airport.
I think I heard this story. No?
Yeah, it's funny. We were shopping for snacks for the plane.
Hey, what are you doing
What
here?
are you doing? That was great. But Nyke, I remember you kind of coming on the scene and seeing the dynamic change. So, and really adding a whole nother kind of dimension to the music. What drew you in? I mean, what made you say this is a good fit to start playing with Craig and his
He
band?
likes to hang out with older people.
I do. No, I mean, I've played with a lot of great musicians, and I've always been attracted to like watching the dynamic on stage and the performance level. And there's not too many guys in the area who can play like this guy. I mean, he's a phenomenal player.
Nice.
And no, for real. And he's an excellent player, and all the guys in the band. Not only are they great musicians, but they're great guys. Don and Wade and I have had a lot of fun hanging out behind stage and getting a chance to get to know him, and I get to beat him up a little bit. I'm probably a pain in his butt half the time, but
Most of the time.
yeah.
Right, 'cause you gotta keep him on point.
We have a lot of fun, and I think we've developed a great friendship over the years.
Why the Lehigh Valley? You guys really could. You could play anywhere. You do play anywhere. You play all over, but you're really good to this area.
Well, he's lived here, and I don't want to speak for him.
62
but
years.
I grew up in the New York area, like I said, in West Point, not the city, but my father worked in the Queens, Bronx, and Long Island, and then his job brought him here. And it was right before my freshman year of high school. And originally, when I moved here, I wanted nothing to do with Pennsylvania. I always
Tough time
hated.
to move.
Yeah, it's it was high school, but even that, you'd have that stigma like, who wants to move to Pennsylvania? And I'm saying this, now.
Right, you love it here. Yeah.
Yeah, but you're from New York, come moving to Pennsylvania, and it grew into the school district offered a lot more, the area offered a lot more, and I know. Between Arts Quest and all the music, the creative arts in general around here, and then you have a lot of sports. With I know you get the Allentown baseball team, but there's just so much going on around here.
Yeah, the arts and music scene is pretty big.
It is, and they lift it up too. It's not just the fact that you have opportunities to play, but they support a lot in the music and creative world as well. It's like they champion their.
Yeah, so it's like it's a good place to be a musician, and Craig and you're saying it's always been like that here.
It's always been like that. When I was a little kid, there were let's say by the mid '60s, there were so many entertainment venues, so many, and they were all underage. I mean, legally, there was no alcohol. Well, I don't know about the parking lot, but inside the venues, they were not. They were not. These were 18 years and younger. King Arthur's Court, the Mod Mill. Those are the ones that I was familiar with because King Arthur's was right outside of Quakertown, and the Mod Mill was right outside of Coopersburg. But there's Purple Owl. There's a ton of them. There's a ton of them, and there was a real scene going on. There used to be a paper that would be included with the morning call, and I forget what they called it right now.
Like an insert?
It was an insert, but
Okay.
it was like several pages, and it was a nightlife thing, but it was before they called it nightlife.
Okay.
It was something else, and they would have these bands' pictures in. Every week, the places were full of the venues that were.
So if you're from here and you're an
was
aspiring
amazing.
artist, you've got a little bit of a support system that you don't always hear about.
Right.
Just culturally, people,
Right.
not, of course, it matters what your family, school, things like that.
Well, that's different. That's
Yeah.
a whole different.
Yeah.
The reason, and I used to laugh about this, but the reason that people say, "Hey, you can still do this," is because when they're speaking directly to me, is because your audience has grown with you, like in age, and that's true. there was a certain era, so a lot of these people grew up in that era. They like that music. We're still playing that music.
Yeah.
So no, believe me, I don't want to exclude a different era. I love it when we're doing Hendrix or Cream or something, and young kids are out there, and I get emails and stuff because we do that music to try and keep it alive. We do our part.
It's interesting though because that is an era that had some sort of connection that transcends time.
Absolutely.
And I have a 14-year-old who decided that she must, I'm going to say as strong as your dream, Nyke, but she must own a ukulele. This was a passionate, I mean, she got like a dog with a bone about it, and that's not her personality.
Wow.
And we were like, this is strange. So we just got her something inexpensive on Amazon. I thought this will be gone. In the span of like 2 weeks, she had taught herself like 30 songs. I mean, really kind of obsessively. And so she's now playing with my husband, super amateur. He'll be even embarrassed that I'm bringing up that he plays music. But they're doing it as this thing together. And what music do you think they're really playing? That music.
That kind of music.
That's
Beatles and
the
so on
music,
and so
right?
forth.
You know, that's sort of what I think. I don't know what it was about that era, but it does transcend time, and it does create like a love of music, and there's such great instrumentation.
Absolutely.
That we lose sometimes.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, that whole era started off as rock and roll. The Beatles were a rock band. They were playing Motown songs. They were playing Chuck Berry songs. You know, I've been to the Cavern. I've been to Abbey Road. I've been to the whole Liverpool scene, because I'm such a fanatic about that stuff. And we did the tour. I wanted to see where this all developed and grew up. They're playing rock and roll. They started out, you know, John Lennon was a rocker from way back. Paul had the melodic sensibility. Those two got together, and the rest the whole world knows about.
When you talk about instrumentation and you know, picking up a guitar, but Nyke, what have you seen happen with strings? You know, we've seen, are there pivotal artists or people that you think that have helped change the perception of including something like a violin in a rock band? For sure.
I think there's both sides right now. I think with technology and being able to see so many other people, whether it's, you know, in social media or YouTube or anything, you can see a lot more of the stringed instruments. Because I remember having parents come up to me and saying, "Oh man, if my kid stuck through and looked at a violin the way that you look at a violin, they just looked at it as classical music and they were bored with it." And I loved classical music growing up, but I also loved, my favorite band from my parents was Jethro Tull, and he played electric flute. And it's like you don't look at a flute as like a rock band instrument. And I always looked at my violin as like, I want to do what he does with a flute with a violin, and like, you know. But I think with performers out there like Lindsey Stirling. And I don't know much about the gentleman who was just on, I think it was America's Got Talent. He just did a whole stint, and I think the two of them performed together. So they're bringing the popularity of you know, using violins and stringed instruments outside of, you know, the classical world. It's not that it was never there in the past, but I think because of it being such a popularized thing now. But at the same time, I know, even just talking to Mike Moran, who's the local, Freedom High School's orchestra conductor, is saying that their numbers in the orchestra and in the string programs are so light right now that he thinks if he's got 30 kids in the orchestra total right now, it's a lot, and that's very light. I mean, when we played, I think we had 100 kids. We had 100 students who were in the orchestra program, and he's not talking about just the string program. He's talking about the orchestra in whole, which includes.
That's the school. That's a whole. We could have a whole other discussion about that.
Yeah, I think that's budget. That's everything else. It's also, you know, as much as, you know, he'll yell at me for having one of these things in my hand all the time. You see all the kids running around with this, and they're more excited about this than having an instrument in their hand sometimes. Not all, but
How much of success in music, and give me the recipe, is studying technique, practice? How much is passion, and how much is sort of drive?
Well, if you have the passion and the drive, you're going to play and practice. So that
has to come first.
That has to come first. You can't just do it because somebody said, all those people I told you about in school, they all stopped. Once they saw, oh, this is going to take time to develop this, and it hurt my finger. They all stopped. I stuck with it. You have, just like sports or anything else, you got to be passionate, ready to go through the lean times and blah blah blah. But I am a firm believer in understanding music theory. I did 2 years of college to really get the theory and the reading and so on and so forth. under my belt. The other 2 years of school is just perfecting that, but I got all the first 2 years that you need as far as a basis to go on. I find that very important. It's very important to progress as a musician. On the other hand, you got a lot of players, Jimi Hendrix, Clapton, John Lennon, we could just go on and on, that didn't know anything about what they were doing.
Yeah.
Hendrix tried. He wanted to study with Miles Davis. Miles tried teaching him, and they gave up because he just...
It was just something that poured out of him, right?
He didn't need it.
Yeah.
He didn't need it. He wanted it. He thought he needed it. But, I just wanted to add one other thing to what you were discussing with the violin. The violin also, by the late 60s and the very early 70s, was being used in jazz. It was always used in, like with Django Reinhardt, in that style, the gypsy jazz. The violin was always there, back in the 30s and the 40s and 50s. But in the rock scene, there were a couple of great rock bands in the 60s that had violin. And then in the early 70s, there was a band called the Mahavishnu Orchestra, who I was nuts about. The guitar player is John McLaughlin, and Jerry Goodman was the violinist. And I saw them on their first tour. Here's a violinist playing through a giant Marshall stack. I mean, this changed my whole perception on what the violin could do, It was in a really loud, great rock setting. And then you had Jean-Luc Ponty, who came afterwards, along with John McLaughlin, later on playing. So there was a lot of that going on, and I'm sure you must have listened to some of that stuff.
And even, like I said, Jethro Tull was a huge fan of Jethro. His keyboardist was also a violinist.
Now that's important, and now you're having an influence over that. I mean, I think that by staying local and letting people see what you can do, it just opens up a different perspective. And how do you guys work on collaboration? Because like you mentioned, you've got a trio, Craig, that you go off with. Nyke, you do some things on the side. How do you decide and keep the relationship sort of positive? I mean, you always hear in these musical relationships there's a fallout and a problem. How do you decide?
There are lots of times.
And how do you decide that?
Believe me, I'm the poster child.
Craig, when he wants, when Nyke says, "I've got this project," are you supportive? I mean, what's the? How do you decide?
He does his own things, and I stay out of his own things. I have a few things that my Martin work. Actually, I've included him with a lot of the Martin work. So we do the holiday shows, and I actually somehow or other got Martin to sponsor us in Italy one time. They don't make violins, but they like Nyke a whole lot too.
I'll tell you what I found out they make a lot. They make a nice ukulele.
I have one. I
found this out because now I'm researching. Oh, this thing might stick.
You can get a really nice one.
Yeah, exactly. What about you, Nyke? What's your perspective on that?
Just to speaking towards Martin too, they've been very generous to me, and having Craig, introduce me and bring me in on that train, and they've been very, very nice to a violinist and a guitarist.
I think people should know. I mean, Martin Guitars here in Nazareth, Pennsylvania, and Chris Martin and the family are
Chris
really.
is great.
They're not really just about the business.
Everybody.
They're really about the artists. They're
They
really
are.
about the music, and I've had the good fortune of interviewing him on a couple occasions.
He and I traveled together.
Pretty cool
I was going to say they're very close
to get to know. So. All right, well, I don't want to let you go without asking a couple things, which is what is coming up for the Craig Thatcher Band and Nyke Van Wyk? What is coming up for you guys, and kind of in the broad strokes, where's the music going?
Well, I want to tell you about one gig that we just did. We just finished it on Sunday, or we just played it on Sunday. We do a lot of Christmas things. We do a lot of giving back. There are benefits, we don't take any pay. There's two churches. Our church, St. John's UCC in Coopersburg, we do 2 shows there at Christmas time. And then Nyke's church, which is the
Cathedral Church of Nativity up here on 378.
The big stone,
Beautiful,
it's a gorgeous church.
That is gorgeous.
So we've done that a number of years. Always great time. But this past Sunday, there must have been close to 600 people show up.
Yep.
They ran out of seats. They ran out of chairs.
They sat them in the choir pits behind us.
They had them in the choir behind us. They had them, and the pastor and people who went there for a long time said they never saw it like that.
Wow.
And the only reason I'm saying that is not bragging. I'm saying it because when we do something like that, it hits me like, wow. I mean, it's two of us. We're not Simon and Garfunkel. We're not, known like that. We are just two local players and can have that kind of impact and draw that kind of crowd. And man, we feed off of that, and it makes me think sometimes, directionally, what way do I want to go? What course do I want to play? I always love playing rock and blues. I'm a blues player at heart. I love getting out and play. Like, we'll be at the Music Fest Cafe on the 29th, next Saturday, doing our Hendrix show. And I love it. It'll be full, and people that love Hendrix, will get into that. And I will. But I look beyond that sometimes, and I think, there's something special here that I don't have when we're not working together. And I don't know, he has a good time whenever, but there's something collaboratively
something magical
that we have
happens,
that doesn't happen.
And I think people pick up on that. And
They
that's
do.
when I say
They do.
I can really recall Nyke
They do. Yeah.
joining forces with you,
Yeah.
and you guys coming out, and the show and the conversation around it changing.
The band was
positive,
never
yeah.
the band was never the band I wanted to be until he came along.
That's neat.
Once he came along, it was like, this is what's missing. I never thought it would be a violinist, but it's like it never was where I wanted it. My thoughts, my ideas, it's like something's missing. Always was missing.
What a special thing when that happens.
And
so,
this came
yeah.
along, and it's like, wow, it just, I don't want to say elevated us, but it did.
Elevated you.
It did.
It elevated you.
did, and it just took us to, made us sound a little bit different from everybody else, and that's what worked.
So there'll be more of that to come,
Yeah,
I hope.
there
Good.
will be.
Before I let you guys go, I want to ask you some rapid fire questions. You good with that?
Sure.
I
We'll
did
see.
not prepare you for this.
It's
I
okay.
did not know what I'm going to ask you.
See.
Nyke, I'm going to start with you.
Sure.
If you did not play the violin, what would you play?
Who? I think I would always answer that question with a very opposite of what you would expect. If I wasn't playing violin, I think it'd be flying fighter jets.
Flying fighter jets. Wow.
Yeah, actually.
That is really different.
Very different. I grew up outside of the West Point area, like I said, so I was always interested in the and he's actually a vet. We should mention that too. He's a Navy vet.
Yeah.
Craig,
Yeah.
thank you for your service.
Oh.
I didn't know that.
My
We
pleasure,
Get that
I
piece
think.
in there.
Yeah. And he's got
Thank
some
you for
stories
mentioning
too.
that.
He's
I
definitely,
appreciate it.
absolutely. So.
All right. If you could have one final meal, what would it be?
Probably the filet mignon steak. That's always I'm a steak
That's
and
your go-to?
meat and potatoes kind of guy. Yeah.
What's a place you've never been to that you'd like to go?
Mediterranean coastline of Greece. I
Okay.
have no family connection to it. I just have always loved to go.
Always somewhere you've wanted to go.
Yeah, there's plenty of places, but that's the first one that jumps.
All
so.
right, Craig. If you could have dinner with 3 people, who would they be? Living or deceased?
It would be Eric Clapton, John Lennon, and Jimi Hendrix.
All right. You've traveled the world. What is your favorite place that you have ever been?
Honestly, Israel was fantastic.
I heard that. It is on my short list.
People are surprised when I say that because
Mhm.
really I've been in about 40 countries, and Israel really tops my list.
All right. And if you were not a musician, what would you be?
I drive race car driver.
Race car driver. Wow. Little adrenaline junkies
Yeah,
over here.
yeah, just-
So is there a correlation between that feeling you get on stage playing music and you think race car driving and fighter jet?
I've always.
I mean, those are both sort of
I
adrenaline.
just like to drive fast.
I'm with you.
All right.
We're
and I
both-
have a sports car.
and we're both car fanatics, so yeah.
I love
Car
it.
nuts.
All right. Well, Craig Thatcher and Nyke Van Wyk, thank you guys so much for being here.
You're
It's
welcome.
been so
Thank
exciting.
you.
We're not going to let you leave without you playing a little music for us and our audience. So
Oh,
we're
sure.
going to do that, but you've been watching Unscripted with Russo, and keep listening because you're going to get to hear some amazing music coming up right now.